Hey everyone, welcome back to Professional Spotlight series. Today, we have a tech enthusiast making waves in the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning. He's reshaping our understanding of technology and its role in our lives. He's developed brain computer interfaces, tackled speech separation, enhanced safety with Alexa at Amazon, and is now revolutionizing HR technology. When he's not transforming the tech landscape, you can find him biking through the hills or scuba diving. Get ready for an engaging conversation about the future of AI and responsible tech. Welcome, Rahil. How are you doing?
Hi, Tanmay. Very good. Thanks for having me. And I'm doing great. How have you been doing?
Wonderful. I have been looking forward to this conversation because we know each other, but we haven't been really in touch for a while. So I just thought this is a good opportunity to catch up. So really excited about this. Let's dive straight into it. What is keeping you busy these days outside of work?
So outside of work, um, I'm constantly trying to, I love the outdoors. So when I'm not working, I'm trying to focus on something that offers me, to test myself and to stretch my capabilities outside. So I love biking, like you just mentioned, and I live in San Francisco, which is a great place to be if you want to be in the outdoors.
Talking about SF and life in the States, do you feel like home in the States now that you have spent several years, or do you still miss the chaos and charm of India?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. So again, I think the US is just such a diverse country. Um, and there are pockets which are, so there are parts of the United States which are just, very more homogenous. And there are parts of the United States which are very immigrant friendly.
Mm,
SF in the Bay Area is definitely the latter. I probably feel a lot at home in this 50-mile radius
mhm.
of San Francisco Bay Area because I see so many folks who look like me and who talk like me and who hold positions of power in the tech space or in the finance space or, just in doing good things. So that really makes me feel more welcomed because people look at me differently. But then, of course, there are parts when you go to there are places where you can go to the United States and then you can not be feeling welcomed.
Mhm.
And and that's just because it's a large country where people think and come from very diverse walks. So of course it's not the same as being an Indian in India where you feel more or less comfortable everywhere.
Right,
But there are definitely pockets here which are just very nourishing and very enriching
right,
in the
right,
United
right.
States.
What would you say are three things give you a sense of belonging in any place? As an expat, you also lived in Italy and now in the US.
I think the one that comes most to my mind is just how welcomed I feel when I go into a place where I don't know anyone. So, for example, if I walk into a cafe or if I'm in a bus, just how other folks who are not Indian, but just how other folks smile at me, look at me, like the unspoken interaction that I
Mm,
have with someone before I introduce myself is more or less positive. So, for example, when I'm getting into a bus and I'm seeing people I don't know, and of again different races of different parts of from different parts of the world, when they look at me, I don't think they look at me as someone. They look at me as an equal, and I think
mm.
that's nice. And like you have like this exchange of smiles,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
exchange
yeah.
of like eye twinkles when you see someone on the street, and I think that feels very welcoming, which probably was lacking in other parts of the world where I've lived. And again, it's not simply because of there not being Indian diaspora there, but I think it was because of like the sense of equality was probably absent because generally the Indian diaspora was not having positions of power, like
Right,
or
right.
of having high positions of responsibility there. So it would be like, you'd always feel like someone's judging you
Mm,
until you
mm.
explain that, hey, like I'm in this university or I'm doing this research. And then they will obviously like, talk to you very normally.
Right.
But you always feel that there's pressure to explain what you're doing, which you don't have to feel here in San Francisco or in parts of in the cities in the US, which is nice.
I can totally relate to it. I exactly know what you're talking about, right? I mean, just to give you an example, and coming back to the point where you have to explain to people, right? So when I was living in Italy, first time if you're meeting people, they just don't know that a lot of Indians who go outside of India also go for work, not just blue collar work, but also to work in tech, to do ambitious
Yeah.
things like going in a good university, things like this. They're
Yeah.
just not aware. So I always had this feeling that you had, that I need to prove some people who I really am to get their validity,
Yeah.
and that my identity was not just attached to my nationality.
Yeah, I kind of noticed this a lot when I was also in during my undergraduate research area, and when I was doing in parts of Italy or in Germany or in just other parts of Europe, I would also realize that like I think people's reception towards me would completely change if I was with my, let's say, either with white friends or with especially like white female friends. And then I would be like, I would feel so much more welcomed. And then in their
Mm.
absence, I would just not feel welcomed. And I'm like, okay, this is not, yeah, I would feel that difference.
More you focus on it, more you realize it. And I think the best way to deal with something like this is just focus on you, but not other people or the judgment of other people towards you. I don't need to prove anyone who I am. What am I doing? I am in focus here. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm content. I don't need to prove anyone anything.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I would see it too. Initially, I would be like, okay, I need to dress up better. I would need to,
Yeah.
I would just like need to buy dress. I would just like need to be taking more attention of how I'm wearing, of what I'm wearing, and like what kind of how I'm presenting myself. But then I realized that I think at the end of the day, it's just about how it makes me feel, and as long as I'm confident
Exactly.
about what I'm doing and how I'm feeling, it doesn't really matter.
Your career is very fascinating. I know you started with biology when you started your bachelor's. Walk me through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I was doing my undergraduate studies in biology and electrical engineering, and I found biology very interesting, especially just the brain. I think studying the brain and neural responses and even the anatomy very, very fascinating. And in electrical engineering, I found signal processing to be very fascinating, which is
Mhm.
when you have these signals that are coming out and how do you make sense of these signals. Of course, the curriculum that we studied was very focused towards the communication point of view because that's where, you know, that's how you would usually teach signal processing. But what I really found interesting was that I'm learning how to make sense of noisy signals from an electrical engineering point of view. And then from the biology point of view, there are these organs that we have the brain, we have various muscles, we have the heart, which generate all these electrical signals, which could be which have so much information in it,
Mhm.
and yet no one really knows what information is there in this. So I started off marrying these two threads of my studies, and I was focusing on brain computer interfaces, which is how do we try to understand what the brain is really emitting when we put electrodes on the brain and we see
Mm.
this very, very noisy signal. It looks like crap. It's just like it's all over the place. But if you really apply a lot of signal processing, if you apply a lot of algorithms, like for denoising and filtering, you can actually get something good out of it. And at the same time, this is 2016. At the same time, there were early, advances in machine learning, which were talking about how they could filter or denoise signals better.
Mhm.
So, given a lot of data, they were able to actually extract these signatures, these biological signatures, even better. And I started using those principles of machine learning in my research. And and we saw that we were able to understand the brain better. And this was very fascinating because it meant that we could actually help folks who were with paralyzed or with stroke
Mhm.
patients. We could actually understand to some extent what they were trying to convey just by focusing on the brain signals that we were
Mhm. Mhm.
capturing
Mhm.
using these electrodes. And that was only possible because we were able to use all this tech from in the and all these advances in the machine learning space to actually clean out and to filter all the signals. So moving forward, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And I think what's really getting more interesting here is just this whole machine learning space, which is helping me clean these signals better. So, and I always wanted to do something more initially, I wanted to do something more towards the medical space because I thought the best use of good tech advances was to be in the was to, use it for medical advancements. So I started working in machine learning and computer vision for image processing so that we could understand how various parts of the body were coming together while
Mhm,
speaking.
mhm,
And this is for using MRI images. And that got me interested in the way a body comes together for speaking. And I'm like, wait, machine learning is cool and the brain is cool, but what's also really cool is about how the vocal cord and the brain talk to each other to
mm,
generate great speech. And then I got into speech processing, which is so, and using AI ML algorithms for understanding how we both speak better and hear better.
mhm.
Um, and one thing that was very interesting, again, which kind of combined all of these, was something called the cocktail party problem. It's a neuroscience, electrical engineering, computer science problem, which is that when we go to a cocktail party, we have multiple people talking. And in spite of that, the human brain can pay attention to one particular person
Mhm.
and really understand what that person is saying. Although there could be music playing, there could be,
Right.
I don't know, wine glasses breaking, there could be a lot of laughing and chattering and all of the sounds that are happening. And yet the brain can really attend to speech. This kind of was a culmination of everything I was interested in. It was a culmination of neuroscience. It was a culmination of speech processing and signal processing. And I decided to do my graduate studies in figuring out or in solving this problem. And this involved a lot of machine learning because it involved how do we get the brain has solved this problem for itself through evolution, but how do I get a voice assistant to be just as robust? If I
Mm,
have, let's say, Siri or Alexa in this room in a cocktail party, there's 100% chance you will not understand what I'm saying because there's just so many
right.
distractions. There's so much happening that my CV or any voice assistant would just go completely blank. So the question is that how do we get a voice assistant have the power of the brain to actually understand what each person is saying? And that kind of made me go that, of course, that has a neuroscience tinge to it, but largely that's an ML problem. That's an MLAI problem because we want to make voice assistants which are robust, which can take an arbitrary amount of noise
Mm.
and be able to tell you what signals are there. So I started working in this field. I started then working with Alexa, and that just kind of snowballed into
Wow.
all the other ML things I'm working on right now.
That's such an interesting path. I mean, it's wild that you start somewhere and then you are able to connect these dots as you're going through this path and you navigate yourself and one thing leads to another and your curiosity kicks in. It's amazing. First of all, I'm very new, so my first follow-up question would be, can you explain me, like I'm 5 or 10 years old, what's the difference between machine learning and AI?
That's a very good question. And I don't think I mean, I think that most people use them. Technically, you
Interchangeably,
can use them
right?
interchangeably.
Yeah.
Yes. There used to be a meme that used to go around back when I was doing my graduate school, which was that the scientists would call it statistics, the industrialists would call it machine learning, and the founders were getting 50 billion valuations on startups would call it AI. What's the thing?
I guess it's
But
still
it's
valid.
but no, so I think machine learning and AI is obviously the very it's the more or less the same. I think what really changes to some extent is just the kind of modeling techniques that you're using.
Mm,
So I think when people are referring to AI, they're just referring to different models, which would either be like more neural network based models. I think the underlying principle, which is that you have some data, which is giving you a sense of probability distributions. And you want to use that to make some sort of either predictions or you want to use that data to generate more data.
mm.
That kind of underlying principle is the same. Whether you're using ML or AI is, I think, I think it could be used interchangeably based on what kind of underlying models you're using.
What did you learn about the brain at the end of the project?
It's very complicated. There's no point of studying it. No, I think there were some very interesting things that we found out. And I think one was there was also this huge noise that was coming around that, okay, with all this stuff that's going on with AI and neural networks, people were like, the neural networks are just like the brain. And
Mm,
a big part of what we found out was that that's not true at all. Just simply from the speech segregation problem, which is that how this cocktail party problem, we realized that the way AI models were able to solve cocktail party problems much better than much better than the brain. So let's say the human brain can give you like, I don't know, 10 points in the metric. AI algorithms was giving you 20 points, which is like twice as better than the brain, which is so interesting because it's like, wait, you're doing better than a human being. But then a lot of my research was actually understanding what these AI models are doing. And
Hmm.
we realized that they're not doing anything like what the brain does. They learn on some completely different signatures, which is not what neuroscientists have confirmed that the brain does not do. So actually, they
Wow.
were learning on something completely different, and which results to a lot of vulnerabilities. Whereas the brain learns on very different underlying principles of the cocktail party problem of
Right.
speech, of how it understands speech, and which makes it solve the problem in a completely different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that was also very interesting because we found out that there is no while people say that artificial neural networks are like creating your own brain, yeah, in a way that's true, but the real underlying principles on which they're working are completely different from the brain.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a very complex problem. I mean, I fully don't understand my own brain, so I think it's so complicated. But it's a very cool blend of AI and machine learning with the human body, and trying to not just understand the human body or human brain, and in this case better, but also to perhaps understand how we can use AI and machine learning in such a way that we could, in fact, help human body become a better tool for us, you know?
Exactly. I think that's spot on. You mentioned it very well, but that it's somewhat complementary to what the brain does. And I
Mhm.
think that is great news for us because that means that we can augment our current capabilities using AI. So for example, since they're using different principles, so even from this cocktail party problem, since it's using a different principle, it means that the set of vulnerabilities for the human brain and in the AI model will be completely different, which means that we can actually augment our current hearing using AI. We could
Mm.
actually, because where that fails, we don't fail, and where we fail, they don't fail.
Yeah.
Um, and same with everything else. And I think that kind of augmentation is something that I'm very interested in now, which is that how do we use these advances to actually, be better in.
People usually ask this question, right? Oh, AI or human beings, but I think that's not the solution, right? It needs to complement each other to make us as human beings or humanity or the world a better place with the help of such technologies. Completely
Yeah,
valid point.
exactly.
You're going one step further into dealing with humans, which is human resources with AI. So what exactly are you doing with implementing AI technology into HR systems?
Yeah, so that's yeah, that's a good segment. So I think the my current work focuses more on like language understanding and language processing using large language models. And I think one thing that we we have a lot of information about, what kind of jobs exist in the market. We have a lot of information about what kind of resumes exist in the market because, online you have all these people saying that, okay, hey, I'm looking for, I don't know, a software engineer, or I'm looking for, a product manager, I'm looking for all kinds of jobs, like the thousands of occupations. um, and what this information contains a lot about, what kind of skills are required in the market right now, and that kind of gives you a signal about what the country what in this case United States, or what countries should be doing to fill up that current market that exists, so that we can have all those jobs filled, and so that we understand what skills are picking up, what skills are dying, because a lot of skills are some skills just die with time. So for example, like typewriting, right? Like I'm sure it was a
Mm.
big skill. It was an important skill. Maybe when our parents were growing up, but of course it's no longer an important skill anymore. So and in today's time, it would be more like, like I don't know, maybe MS Word. Like it's not really an important skill to have anymore because it's because there's so because uh, so much more has happened that can augment it. So currently, what we're just trying to work on is understand what are the various what are the various occupations in the United States that are having that are hiring? How much are the what are the benefits that
Mhm.
these roles have, and what are the skills that they require? And we're trying to work with some parts of the US government, with some agencies in the US government to share this information with them so that they can then downstream change the way they have education, they can change policy so that they can, help so that they can have training so that these skills get more attention so that those labor markets can get filled up. So, for example, let's say that we find out that, okay, a lot of companies across the US require Excel or require basic programming as a
Mhm.
skill. This is something that is not quantified yet. This is something that we know through years
Mm.
that, okay, everybody requires programming, but there's no real quantification. Using AI, we can actually map all this information that's there online and say that, okay, this is exactly how much emphasis that is there on a skill like coding or programming. And these are the benefits that these skills are giving you. They're going to give you so much pay. They're going to give you this much in health
Mhm.
insurance and this much remote work, these many paid holidays, etc. So
But where does this data come from?
it comes from across the internet, we keep pulling in data from various NGOs which have all the job postings across the United States.
Uh-huh.
So it's coming from job postings. Every day, companies like small companies and big companies are uploading hundreds of job postings online, saying that, okay, we are looking for a programming engineer, we are looking for a product manager, we are looking for, an accountant
Mhm. Mhm.
with these skills and with this much pay. This information is currently very unstructured. It's all over the place. If we could structure it and come up with and do some kind of data analysis on this, then we can go and tell the government that, look, this is the importance of focusing or of investing in programming right now. It will help your
Mm.
industry boost up. And not just that, it will help convert people who are making X dollars a year to maybe 1.5x dollars a year, which is going to
Mm.
be better for the citizens or for the people who work in your country. It's going to help you attract talent.
Mm.
So we are currently collaborating with some parts of the U.S. government to understand this so that they can then work around um, changing their education and the policies for these skills. Secondly, another thing that I'm also working on is just understanding how we can match resumes and jobs better.
Mm.
Uh, I don't know if you've had issues. I don't know if you've gone through that problem where, you have to like write a resume for a particular job, which is just so difficult because you have to like make sure that you're hitting certain keywords. You have to make sure that you have various action words. It's not a fun process at all. You have to
Yeah.
like then send it to your friends who have good jobs and then say that, hey, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, oh yeah, don't use this sentence. It's a bad sentence. And it's an iterative process. So currently we're also just trying to fix this problem by having good algorithms that could just match jobs and
Mm.
resumes based on just how similar various parts of the language or the semantics are, how whether it's meeting certain skills, whether it's we can then calibrate whether this person's a good fit for the role or not a good fit
Right,
for the
right.
role.
That shall help organizations with the first part of screening the candidates, right? They don't need to go through this laborious task of matching resumes and doing this first round of filtration before they go into the next stage of interviewing.
Yeah, exactly. That's and um, spot on. I think currently screening is a very manual process, and it's a process which has a lot of biases in them.
Mm.
Uh, so, for example, I think most people would just like, go through LinkedIn profiles and then they would look for keywords that, oh, I'm looking for, I don't know, microarray assays. So I'm only let me see if someone's written microarray assays in their resume or on their LinkedIn. If someone has written an abbreviation of that, then they won't catch it. And
Mm.
they say this person doesn't fit the criteria. Or if someone's used a synonym, again, they won't catch it and they will say that this person does not meet the criteria.
I think the biases are also probably because of the race, because of where you're located. So I guess there are not just the biases about the content of the resume itself, but such biases which could come into the picture when a person is going through the set of resumes, correct?
You're spot on again with that. So I think biases also come in about like, I think recruiters tend to be biased towards that. Oh, hey, this person is from this university. This person's from this
Mm,
area. Let me only look at them or their first connection of LinkedIn connections. Um, and that's also, again, detrimental to the entire downstream process. Now, not to say that AI is not biased. It can be, it can get there. And a lot of my work also focuses on responsible AI, which is that how do we make sure that AI is not biased?
yeah,
Because you're right, humans can get biased. And you're also, and this human data is what's eventually used to
yeah.
train AI algorithms. So it's a chicken and egg problem.
Right.
But we have been working very hard, and we've come up with some really good frameworks to reduce the amount of
Biases.
biases in
Hmm.
AI. So I've been working on responsible AI for I think the last 3 years now, where we are trying to reduce two things. One is privacy leakage in AI models,
Hmm.
and B is the amount of biased information that AI models learn.
Mm. I feel like that's a space where AI can do a lot of good if we get it right. So responsible AI, I really love this term. So cheers to what you're doing. And how are the people in this space perceiving this? Are they starting to see value of what you're doing, or is there still a lot of skepticism around this?
No, actually, I think folks are definitely seeing value, especially now. So, for
Mm.
example, I was working in responsible AI before the whole generative AI wave.
Hmm.
So I was working in privacy at the time, and folks were like, "Okay, yeah, this is important, but is this really that important? Like, is this the biggest problem in set of problems?" But I think now with the whole generative AI wave that's come up
Mm.
since ChatGPT came out, I think people really realize that uh, privacy and responsible and privacy is very important, especially because we are now using these AI systems for so many things. Like we are using them for hiring and recruiting. We are using them for healthcare. We are
Right.
using them for financial documents. So you have to analyze financial documents. So we need to make sure that if this system is seeing anything that's private, it does not learn that, or it quickly forgets that, so that it does
Mm.
not um, um, spew
Sell
this
your
out to
data.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, I was working on this when I was at Alexa in 2022, and again, the idea here is very simple. Like Alexa would be trained on past utterances. I just triggered my Alexa. So this model will be trained on all the past utterances, um, and when you give permissions, of course. And now let's say that I have given permissions to Amazon to train on my utterance, and let's say I have a sentence in my. I've probably said that, "Hey Alexa, call Tanmay at his phone number 12345." Now, imagine if the model learns this and memorizes that Tanmay's phone number is 12345.
Mm.
Now, if somebody else is using Alexa and says that, "Hey, call Tanmay," it might say, "Yeah, sure, I'm calling Tanmay at 12345." Now,
Mm.
that's a privacy
That's
risk that you just cannot take.
that's freaky.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So a lot of my work was focusing on making sure that this does not happen, which is that how do we make sure that these models do not learn anything that is private?
What
Um,
what were the biggest challenges you were facing, or are you are still facing with this?
yeah, I think the biggest challenge here is so the multiple challenges. The first one is that how do we understand what something is when I say something is private? Like, how do you define what private is?
Hmm.
Because I can say that a phone number is private, but so maybe remove phone numbers, but then I can't remove every number because based on the context, that number is not private. An
Right.
example is that call 10 might 12345, 10 might and 12345 is private. But now call McDonald's outside my house at one, two, three, four, five.
Mm.
That's not private. That's a public number. Everybody knows that McDonald's is phone number is one, two, three,
Right.
four, five. So how do we do that kind of? How do we understand what is private, what is not private, so that we then, train the model downstream?
Mm. Wow. That sounds like a really real balancing act.
Yeah,
Getting people to trust the technology while also making sure that it's as fair as possible.
yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, we don't want losing trust of the customer is the worst thing that you can do.
Mm.
And at the same time, you don't want to ruin the performance of your system. So coming up with that trade-off where you have a good performing system, and at the same time you're doing everything possible to make sure that you don't lose your customers' trust
Right.
while building a product is actually very interesting.
You're doing an important job.
Thank you.
What do
And
you what do you think about AI technology bubble? I'm calling it a bubble because in past few years it has
Mhm.
become such a bubble. A lot of investments pouring in from all over the place. Literally every company, irrespective of any field, wants to get hands into this AI race. Is it a real thing or is it hyped at this
um,
point in time?
I think it's a bit of both. Um, I I think it's a lot of both. So, for example, um, I don't know about you, but I, for example, use a lot of AI tools. Like I use ChatGPT a lot,
Mm,
um, whether it's to write code, whether it's to write documents, and other, well, not just ChatGPT, but even other competitors. So I
right.
use Anthropic's models a lot. Um, I'm doing a lot of documentation right now, and I'm just putting a lot of that through the Anthropic models, and getting very good results out of it, which saves a lot of my time.
Mm,
Same with code. When I'm like, a lot of functions, I just give it off to these LLMs and say that, hey, do this for me. Or, hey, I have this in this format. Could you please translate it to this other format? Because I'm lazy. And it would do well. And so I know that I'm using this for myself.
mm,
Um, and that gives me confidence that there is a requirement for this. So when I speak to my family, for example, my dad just uses ChatGPT or Perplexity instead of Google these days.
right.
Um, and and the fact that he that that folks require see the need to do that means that there is some added advantage that a current tech stack is not filling in. So of course
Absolutely.
there is an advantage of using AI or generative AI tools. Um, the question is that how much is it now? Like, is it a 50 billion advantage? Is it a 100 billion advantage? Now that's where probably I would get a little murky about. Like, I do see some companies getting crazy valuations for things that
Right.
I probably disagree with. But so there is some sort of like a bubble, but I don't think that the hype is not real. Like, it
Yeah.
is going to be. I think it differs from, like, crypto, where
Mm,
crypto also had a bubble, but then as a user, as an everyday user, I don't really see that.
right.
I don't see the importance of crypto. I don't see the importance of, ed tech. I wasn't using Coursera. I wasn't binging on Coursera or something like that. So I wasn't, um, I think that there is a difference here, which is that it's actually useful. So it's going to be like the dot com. It's going to be exactly like dot com, where
Mm.
is dot com useful? Of course, we still use it all the time and much more. But is there going to be a crash? I fear so. Yes.
No, that does make sense. I think long term there is definitely value, but we are not there yet. I think there are certain things, certain aspects of our life that are improving because of these technologies, but we are not there yet to value these things at, as you said, 50 billion, 100 billion, or whatever. So totally agree. Switching gears a bit, you come from a family where business was probably an expected path for you. Did you feel any pressure to go in the route that you chose right now? Was there any instance which made you think that, okay, business is something that's not for me, and this is not what I want to do, and I want to pursue higher education in tech and go in that direction.
Yeah, so I think that's I always found it very. I think growing up, I had this mentality where I would do like the most quintessential Indian thing, which is I'll get an engineering degree and I'll get an MBA and I'll go into business. And I think I was very mentally prepared for that even before I started my engineering. I'm like, okay, engineering is just something that's going to teach me how to be systematic. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be in tech. And I was very so at the start of my engineering class coursework, I was, like following at the time the Facebook IPO was happening. So I was like, very passionate about like, say, okay, what's happening to the Meta stock or to the Facebook stock? Like who's buying, who's selling, how's this going? We had a club in our university called the Wall Street Club where we would follow this, and I was again like, very excited about this stuff. So. Um, but I think what really changed was just, and I was thinking about like, I want to know, just let's just be passionate about what I'm currently studying or what I'm currently
Mm,
working on. And what I was studying at that time was biology and engineering. So let's just be passionate about this because there's so much that I can actually do when I focus on this. Um, that the business part will take care of itself. Like I don't have
mm,
to, let's first go dive deep into something, learn about a problem. Let's be passionate about a problem. Let's figure out whether you're solving a real solution, and then the business part will take care of itself. I
mm,
think that's the kind of the route that I decided to follow, and I follow this simply because I think I was really enjoying what I was studying.
mm.
Um, Especially in biology. And it comes down to good faculty, good good peers who are very enthusiastic about what we were doing,
Right.
and seeing that okay, hey, if I actually study this, then if I figure this out, the ramifications of this are so much more than learning what mergers and acquisitions are. Like I can actually like get so much more advantage if I invest in this. And
Mm.
then, of course, I mean, I don't think I'll ever. I mean, I'm Gujarati, so I don't think I'll ever say bye to the business part. Um, but and maybe I will still follow that route. But I will just make sure that it's more focused on my tech skills now, which is that
What you're
it will have
passionate
to be
about, right?
it'll have to be something I'm passionate about. So, which is about maybe something about responsible AI, maybe something about um, fairness and bias, so maybe something about HR and AI. But it has to be something, it might happen later down the line. But I think following something that you're passionate about without, and just like keeping all the preset notions that, hey,
Mm.
I've always wanted to do this, so let me continue doing this. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you have to just keep taking the next step based on what you're, just be foolish about it. Just see that, okay, yeah,
Wow.
this looks awesome. Let's spend the next few months studying this. I'll see where that goes next. I think that's,
It's so true. There's always, especially in India, right, a culture like that. There are always expectations to follow, may it be traditions, family businesses, whatever it may be. You have so high expectations of about your career from someone else that you tend to forget what you really want. And it's so rewarding to break out of that and just follow what you really want to do, what you're really passionate about. That kind of reward you will not get anywhere. And cheers to you breaking out of those traditions and following your heart. You're fortunate here, right? Because that weighs in so much into certain decisions that you make in your not just career but life, like role of your parents and family. And in this case, I always tell people that my parents grew up with me, right? So as a parent, you're able to adapt to your values, your principle, your beliefs as your son or daughter grows up, right? Because if you're going to stick with the same thing that were valid probably when you were growing up, it's not going to work. That then this distance keeps increasing, and this is same going to be true when probably when we become that generation, right? So
yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. Parents growing up with you is exactly how it's so important. And again, like, even for us, to keep in mind for our futures, for our future is that, there can be some things that you're rigid about, and there's some things that are that
Mm,
you can probably be. You have to be very careful about what you're rigid about. It has to be something that has to be coming from a very rational and a logical point of view. It cannot be something that comes
true,
from an emotional point of view.
true.
Because the minute it does, and the minute you see your kids not doing that, um, there will be the sense of friction because you're not able to
True.
convey why this is important to you. Um, and I think it's, and I see this so often, especially in the US, where um, a lot of the Indian, a lot of the first generation Indians here were raised by parents who left India back in the 80s.
Mm,
And when they left in the 80s, they came with the 80s mindset of being a
mm,
parent. And they were like, okay, and they raised their kids because they wanted to raise their kids as, Indian. They raised them with the 80s mindset. And
right.
very often that meant like a way more regressive, way more less open-minded culture than what you and I grew up to in India.
Mm, right. Right.
Um, and that really affects the relationship between the parent and the child. Like,
Right.
I think all of them are just so, I don't know, they're so like constrained by their parents. Whereas I think my parents were like, okay, this is how it's going to be, and this is how we don't want to upset you over something that is negotiable.
Right.
Uh, and let's take that forward.
I'm curious now, when things get tough, who do you call? Like, how do you handle work pressure, issues in your life? Of course, you're married, you have a wife, but she's there to listen, maybe not provide solution all the time, right? So what do you do when going gets tough?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's fairly multi-tiered. And the most accessible thing is that I would obviously chat with my wife about this. My wife comes from a very similar field professionally, so it's very easy for us to talk.
Mhm.
And she's very rational, so it's very easy for us to she'll tell me that, okay, hey, this is actually your fault. Like, don't like this was your planning mistake. You should, she'll tell me as it is, which really helps me, just work on it harder and get things done. Um, Secondly, of course, I have my parents, where my parents and my sister, who are very, they don't come from my field, but then they've been working for obviously multiple decades now. So
Right.
I always get a good high level feedback, or, like just making sure that I'm doing the things right. Like, like one very important thing that my dad told me is that don't shy away from hard work. Like, hard work is important, but
Mm,
then shy away from stress. Like, stress is not good, but hard work is very important.
mm,
Which means that even if you're working 15 hours a day, do it. Like, don't, it's important to work 15 hours a day sometimes, and make sure you do it, but make sure it doesn't come at your cost of stress, which is that,
right.
and stress means where you are not in harmony, or where you're not motivated to do. You're working for 15 hours on something that you don't want to do. That's stressful because
Mm,
in your heart and your head, you're like, okay, I want to be doing that, but instead of spending 15 hours working on this. And that's really bad for
right.
your personal health, your professional health, your family's health, everything.
And work.
Um, and work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Again, there will be instances where you have to do something, but make sure that that's like, a temporary instance where it's like,
Mm,
okay, it's for some delivery that has to go out, some due date, or some
mm,
particular,
mm, mm,
it's
mm,
a one-time thing and it's not a recurring thing. Um, so I think I get very good high-level feedback from my parents about this. Um, I mm, and I think sometimes when I just want to, like, de-stress and not do things by myself. Uh, I also have a nephew and a niece who's like a year and 2 years old, and sometimes just talking to them is like such a de-stress. I get zero professional feedback from them, but I just realize that, okay, like, things are way more important than some of the small things that I
Yeah.
corner myself about. Like, there's just so much more than a stupid report or a stupid paper that's not getting accepted. So I think that's also really nice. I have this multi-tiered system of my life and my family. I also have a bunch of, during my grad school, I would also, like, listen to a lot of these same inspiration videos, which which I think really helped me. I think the common YouTube videos of like the Rocky Balboa speech or the Steve Jobs speech, as cliche as they are, I think sometimes you need to keep re-listening to them so that you're like, oh yeah, maybe things are not that bad, and maybe I can get back out of this.
That's awesome. I think having such a support system at your disposal makes a lot of difference. And you realizing also when is it the right time to ask for help is also very important. Otherwise, you will just drown, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. And I think this is especially true for like folks who are doing a PhD or something. Like I think
Mm,
this was most needed for me when I was doing my PhD
mm,
because I just felt so isolated.
mm,
Uh, because you only work with an advisor. You don't have so many colleagues necessarily to work with, and your advisor is not something you can keep going up to every time you have an issue, right? Like so, knowing how much to bother someone and when to bother someone, and how much you can just like take on your own and keep persevering was definitely one of those things that I is exactly what I learned during those few years.
it's also those moments that really stick with us, right? These become the big learnings of life
Yeah,
that you are now equipped with going forward in your life. Like
yeah,
you fall down, you realize how I fell down. There is someone to pick you up, and then you can make sure that you don't fall down the same manner again. Maybe you
yeah.
fall down in a different way, but then that's a new learning.
Absolutely. And when you fall down and when you pick yourself up and when things work, I think that's just like the best feeling. Like I
Yeah.
think when things when you're like, okay, there's just no hope in working on this, and then um and you worked on it for 2 years maybe, and then one day you spend like you have like a crazy idea one night, and over 8 hours you just change the direction of what you're working on. I think
Mm.
that's amazing, and that used to happen to me a lot. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know.
Now we're gonna segue into a fun segment of rapid fire. So
Okay,
it's time for some quick hits. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
okay, sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Who's the most influential person in your life?
I think my grandfather. I think more when I was a kid. I think probably now it's probably either my dad or my wife, but I think at least growing up it's probably my
Mm,
grandfather because he had, again, like I think a very inspiring story which
mm.
uh, he and my grandmom would keep telling me. He was a physicist, and then he decided to go into business, and I think that was like very interesting because it was kind of what I learned, where I was like, like just going into pure science is not going to be super important, but it's
Mm.
going to be everything else as well.
What's one thing you wish you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self?
I think probably just following my passion about actually 18-year-old self. I would probably be just to spend more time outdoors. I wish I would spend
Mm.
more time outdoors because I don't think you get that again and again.
That's true.
So yeah,
What's a what's a red flag for you in a friendship?
I think perhaps ego, like
Mm,
where it's like, um, and I think especially now with age, like I think friendships are harder to it's hard to make deeper connections.
mm,
And I think that's just because people keep putting their own ego first, which kind of makes it very hard to really connect because friendship is all about like, connecting and being vulnerable and like, like
right.
having that connection with somebody. But if you're always whereas if you're always egoistic about something where you're always putting your interests all the time, in front of the others, it's kind of harder to do that. And I think that's probably what the reason why it was so much easier to make friends when we were younger, because it was like when we were in college or
Mm,
before your 30s, because I think it's just you don't have I think you have like your guard is lower, so I think it's easier to connect and to like have conversations without thinking, oh, how will this be perceived, how will this
mm.
affect my image in front of everybody else and everything. So yeah.
That's a great answer. I think I never looked at it in through that perspective, but it's a very valid point.
Yeah, I think, so I keep wondering, right? Like, why is it difficult to make true friends? Like, of course, we can make friends, but like, acquaintances, but how do you make real good friends at work? And it's very difficult to be friends with someone who you are working with
Right.
shoulder to shoulder all the time. And that's simply because like you have to have that real connection, which doesn't really impact how they look at you
Mm-hmm.
professionally and everything. So it's because, it's like you don't want the two to be intertwined a lot. And I think that's what I thought it would come down to, which is that I want to open up to somebody, but at the
Right.
same time, I can't open up to somebody who, if I think I'm going to be judged uh, for that
Through a
when
different
I'm
lens.
through a different lens when I'm working with them.
As you get older, you're already preoccupied with so many things that you just don't have time to spend just a time for your friends. It's very limited. And
Yeah,
if I look back, also friendships from school time or university, I think it comes down to spending time. You
that's true.
like I if I now look at someone and I'm like, would I have been friends with this person if I wouldn't have spent
Mm,
4 years of my life with this?
yeah,
Probably not.
yeah. That's actually that's very true. I also think it's like adding to that. I think when you spend 4 years or when you spend like so much time with somebody, you really see a complete picture of somebody. You're not
Mhm.
just seeing what they're presenting. You're not just seeing what you see in a time shot of like,
Right.
60 minutes at a party or something. You're seeing everything. You're seeing how they interact with their family when you're like, when
The
you get
full
a phone call
picture.
from, yeah, you
Yeah.
see everything, right? Like you see how they are before exams, you see how they are after exams, how they are on a bad day, how they're on a good day. And that just like really, I think just like you kind of embrace the personality much more.
Okay, moving on. What's your opinion which is unpopular when you tell your friends?
Oh, actually, there are quite a few now that I think about it. Uh, so, especially with my American friends, I think I'm completely in favor of like a lot of the taxation policies that the that some folks on the left are proposing, which is like
Mm,
taxing more. I think that
mm,
makes complete sense.
mm,
I also have very different opinions about immigration policies in this country,
mm,
which may not necessarily be true about. I mean, which do not really necessarily gel well with my same
mm.
more left leaning friends, because I think that immigration in this country is a big issue, and I mean I think there has to be a more systematic way of looking at it.
Mm,
I think that I do see more advantages of and another unpopular opinion that comes up again with when I'm start chatting with folks with the Indian diaspora is that I do see advantages of like finally moving back to my own country,
mm,
which is very usually not taken well because they're like, oh, with
right.
pollution, infrastructure, blah blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, but there's so much more. So I think it's usually amongst these three
Mm.
with folks here.
All right, moving on. What's one thing that you could change about the current AI technology, if you could?
I would like to democratize it way more. I
Mm,
I I think I just want more people to learn about this, on how to use it, not even just how to like, not on developing it, but just on how to use it. And I think
mm,
that's going to be so important because otherwise what's going to happen is that you'll have these countries or these people who use it will just like shoot, they'll just like do really well. And then you'll have all these other people who don't know anything about it and they won't probably be at the same bar.
mm,
So I
mm,
really want folks, for example, back home, like from my family who are not very tech focused, to just use it so that
mm.
they then, because otherwise, 5 years later, I think they will feel
Left
professional
behind. Yeah.
disadvantages. Yeah, yeah. So I just want more people to like use it, just not improve it, just use it so that we can all move ahead in life.
All right. I hope
Um,
you had fun with rapid fire. I have also introduced another segment, and I've kept these fun segments at the end so we can lighten up
okay,
the mood and
yeah,
kind
this
of
is
end on
great.
a high. So this
Yeah,
is called Mythbusters. So
okay,
I'm gonna just run through few myths, and you're gonna bust them.
okay,
All right. So first one, AI is going to take all our jobs.
maybe. Do I have to bust them? Um, no, okay. I think not anytime in our lifetimes. Not for
Mm,
most of us. And even if it does, I think it's fine because we really need to work on more important problems, like
mm,
figuring out climate change. So I don't care if it takes away my job as a machine learning researcher, as long as I can, then take that time and fix climate change. I think that's worth it.
all right. That's a good answer. Another myth, you need to have a plan for your whole career when you are getting out of the university.
Absolutely not. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Uh, I think I definitely knew I did not want to take a job, and I just wanted to just keep doing what was interesting, and I kept doing that. And I think it's so far it's worked out pretty fine. I've also been very open to what other people have had to say, and I've worked on that. Like,
Mm,
for example, my wife was of the opinion that I should, like, be more industry focused. I took that opinion. I became more industry focused and less research focused. I do not regret it at all.
mm,
So I think be open minded, just do what you're passionate about. And I don't know what, it's very hard to predict the
yeah.
future. As long as you're doing something that's fun, it's cool.
Evolve is the right word, I think.
100%. We should just keep evolving. Our Everything around us is changing. And if you know that this is what you're going to be doing for the next 10 years on the day you graduate, you're probably not thinking big enough.
Mm,
Um, so I think it's kind of shallow. So I think if you know exactly what you want to be doing 10 years or 15 years later, you really need to think larger, you think bigger, because the more deeper you go into something, you learn about so many problems,
yeah,
and they'll all be so interesting that you want to
yeah.
solve at least one of them. And let's just go deeper and fix that.
All right, the last one. Working in tech means all work, no life.
Well, that's definitely not true. I think I've really enjoyed my life outside of work. It's a
Mm,
big part of what allows me to focus during work. So, for example, when obviously I like biking, but I also recently, my wife and I started going scuba diving, which
lovely.
we absolutely love. We try to include this in all our holidays. Whenever we're going, we try to go towards the beach whenever we can go diving. We Eating is a big part of my part outside of home, like of my part outside of work. I love trying out new cuisines. So I think, no, there is a lot of play. And I think it's so important to be in touch with that. But it doesn't have
Mm,
to be the outdoors. It could just be a sport. Like, I feel so much more energized every time I'm playing tennis or
yeah.
something. And then coming back to work, I just feel so much more um, richer.
Balanced.
So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the endorphins just kick in. And I think play is a very important part of work, even in tech.
That was fun. Those were the myths that we busted today. It's been a great conversation. As we come towards ending this episode, I asked this question to every guest because it's called Professional Spotlight Series. So, if you had to put three spotlights on your journey so far, on the instances which were impactful for your life, what would these three be?
I think my first instance would probably be this crazy idea of marrying biology and electrical engineering to do brain signal processing or working with brain computer interfaces. I think that was such a obscure topic back in, and still is probably, but now you have, Elon Musk's company and everything. So it's more people know
Hmm.
about it. In 2016, it was just so obscure. And I thought it was like living a science fiction um, movie. So I think that, like, keep live that science fiction dream. If you see something that you think looks cool in a movie about the future, and if you get an opportunity to work on it, do it. Don't
Hmm.
think twice. So I think that was my first spotlight. The second one was perhaps working in just understanding how we speak and we listen.
Hmm.
Because I think that's such an important part of how understanding how our brain does it, and B, how we can get other computers to do it, which will
Hmm.
just help communicate in such a natural way. And I think that the third spotlight was probably just like learning more about the ill effects of hate speech, of biased speech, and working on responsible AI to try to fix it. Because at the end of the day, I just wanted to, feel like I was doing something to make the world nicer. And
Hmm.
again, it's so difficult to A, have an impact, and B, feel impactful. But I think during COVID, I just felt so useless, right? Like, because you have so many people dying, everything's going bad, and to make things worse, people are just spreading misinformation, and it's so easy to be nihilistic and feel it's so difficult to contribute. And I think trying to find threads of how I can connect today's problems with my research and see how I can fix them was, again, so important, because that really helped me get out of that shell and start working in other fields.
This has been a real pleasure. I mean, Rahil, you have been an amazing guest, and we haven't been in touch for a while, even though we were in the same university. I need to give you flowers where they're due, and I'm really proud of what you're doing. And I have seen you in the university studying biology, preparing for exams, and now really doing things that impact today's world. I'm proud of what you're doing, and I wish you a lot of success. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I felt this conversation took me back 10 years ago. So thanks for making me feel so comfortable and so smooth. And thanks for having me around. I love the series. I love the idea of the series. I think it's so important to help folks feel that, you don't, that there is so much to do, and that you don't need to know what you have to do. Because I've been here when I was after my undergrad, after my grad school, throughout. And I think I love the idea that you've come up with. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Unboxing Stories Professional Spotlight Series. I hope you found today's discussion as inspiring and insightful as I did. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback keeps our passion alive and helps us reach more incredible listeners like you. Thanks for listening. I'm Tanmay K, and I look forward to having you join us again for our next episode, where we will feature another fascinating professional. Until then, keep striving, keep thriving, and keep unboxing your story. Until then, goodbye.